want to, before we start today, before we investigate, do you want to reorganize or do you want to revolutionize? Typically what we do in our schedules is we reorganize. We say, okay, Randy, you've been talking about building margin, you've been talking about slowing down, you've been talking about, stepping back and looking at what we're doing and saying, okay, I've got too much non-eternal stuff in my schedule. I've got to build some margin to be used by God. Typically what we do is we just rearrange that. We just sort of mix it up. If you want to do that, then run out and buy one of these books I'm about to talk about. If you want to just reorganize, you can do that. If you want to revolutionize, that's a whole different it takes a whole different plan. It's one thing to reorganize. It's a whole different scheme to revolutionize, because reorganize tends to deal with the outside. Well, I'm going to fix my schedule. I'm going to sleep an extra hour. I'm going to do this. I'm going to build some margin, like Randy said. That's dealing with the outside. And many of the things we've talked about up these past 5 weeks have dealt with the outside, because we do need to deal with the outside things. But if you want to revolutionize your life and really simplify, it starts from the inside out. It starts from the heart and goes out. Here's a book that I found I think you'll get a kick out of. It's entitled Simplify Your Life, 100 Ways to Slow Down and Enjoy the Things That Really Matter. Sounds like a great title. Sounds like exactly what we've been talking about. So I went ahead and got online and was trying to find some things out about this book, and I found the table of contents. I want you to look at this. This is just chapter 1. Just chapter 1 in your household. Reduce the clutter in your life. Good. I hope it tells me how to do that. Use Dave's uncluttering system. All right, now I've got a system on how to break down my other system of clutter. Use speed cleaning to clean your house. Cut your grocery shopping time in half. Buy in bulk. Plant a garden. That doesn't take any time. Run all your errands in one place. I really want to read the chapter on that. Cut your laundering chore in half. Stop buying clothes that need to be dry cleaned. All right. That's going to help some. Leave your shoes at the front door. Go for patterned carpet, I guess, so you can just mess it up and you won't see it. Use food trays. Keep your plants outdoors. Replace your lawn ground cover. And then 15 you can't even read because I don't have the next page. So here's the thing. You need a social secretary to remind you of all the things that you're supposed to do to simplify. And that's just chapter 1 in your household. We hadn't gotten to your work. I guess there's going to be a chapter, maybe your relationship. Who knows? What I'm talking about is, what we're talking about in this thing is not just adding more and more stuff that's going to help fix our other stuff that we already have too much of. That's not the point of this. The point of this whole thing is to simplify. I found another book I thought you'd get a kick out of. The title of it is Focal Point, a proven system to simplify your life, double your productivity, and achieve all your goals. Simplify your life, double your productivity, achieve all your goals. A 500-page book on how to do that. One book that I found, I forgot the name of it offhand, it was 872 pages, 20-something chapters, and there were like 60-something principles involved. That doesn't sound too simple to me. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong. I need it more simple than that. I need it much more simple than that. I wouldn't be able to read that 10 times and tell you 3 things I read on that page. I need to break it down, typically into 3s, and remember things to simplify. And it all goes back to, do I want to reorganize? Do I want to buy the 100 ways to simplify your life and keep that on a card and every day go, okay, I need to do this. Oh, let's take our plants outdoors. That's going to save us some time. And, let's rip up the carpet and put some patterned carpet down to remind myself of that, and just rearrange the outside, or do I want to start from the inside and learn how to maintain a simple life complexion? The way that I approach my life and live my life and teach my children, approach it simplistically, or at least keep it simple. Is it going to be difficult? Is it going to get into gray areas and complications, and is it going to get convoluted? Absolutely. But the harder we try to simplify, I think the happier we'll be. To maintain a simple life complexion, here's where it starts, guys. Simplify the way you speak. Simplify the way that you speak. First of all, to other people. And when you do that, remember that honesty is always the best policy. I just happened to catch, sometimes I like to watch Larry King live. He has some fairly interesting guests on there, and he's fairly provocative, and he asks questions sometimes that nobody else asks. And I happened to be going by there, and this former talk show host, Bill Maher. Do any of you remember Bill Maher? He used to have I think a late night. I never really watched him. I watched him a little bit, and I couldn't really stomach him, so I didn't watch him anymore. But he happened to be on Larry King Live. And Bill Maher, who would probably be considered a political liberal, you know, if I don't like labels, but if you're going to be labeled, that's probably what he would be. He was discussing the removal of the Ten Commandments in Montgomery. And here's what he said. Larry King asked him, he said, I caught just the last part of what Larry King was saying about something like, well, so Bill, are you against the Ten Commandments? Is that what it's about? And he said, no, it's not that I'm against the Ten Commandments. It's just I think that we're going backwards in this country religiously. That was his comment. I thought, ooh, I'm listening now. And here's what he said. He said, of those 10 commandments, there's really only 2 that have to do anything with the law. Thou shalt not kill. He said, I'm for that. I agree with that. Thou shalt not steal. I'm for that one. I think that's a good one, he said. And then he said, and the only other one that even comes close is thou shalt not lie. He said, thou shalt not bear false witness, which means don't lie. And he said, if you're in a court of law and you commit perjury, I think that pertains to law. But other than that, outside the courtroom, that has no bearing in our life. It doesn't. So God was just giving those just to be used in a judicial setting. Thou shalt not lie. This is not a discussion about whether the Ten Commandments should be in the rotunda of a courthouse or not. I think, Bill Maher, unfortunately, encapsulated what many people in America think. The Ten Commandments don't really have. Notice he didn't even touch thou shalt not commit adultery. So Bill, be all right if your wife goes out and, plays the field a little. That all right with you? Jesus, in his Sermon on the Mount, has something to say about speech. Now, I'll tell you right now, this passage is embedded in the context of oaths, but it still has to do with the way that we talk to each other. Jesus says, don't say anything you don't mean. This counsel is embedded deep in our Jewish traditions. You only make things worse when you lay down a smokescreen of pious talk saying, I'll pray for you, and never doing it. Or saying, God be with you, and not meaning it. You don't make your words true by embellishing them with religious lace. In making your speech sound more religious, it becomes less true. Just say yes and no. And when you manipulate words to get your own way, you go wrong. I like that from the Message, Matthew 5, 33, 34, and 37. The bottom line, Jesus says, is honesty. It's honesty. Don't fluff up your speech with other people to make yourself sound more spiritual, more caring, more knowledgeable than what you really are. Now, when I say honesty is the best policy, understand, I don't need to put in brackets here. That means you can say anything you want that you believe to be true to another person, especially if it hurts them. That's not what I'm saying. But we all know what it's like to say, someone says, you may talk to them and say, how you doing? Say, well, I'm having some trouble and this is happening in my life. You say, well, I'll pray for you. And you say that to them to try to comfort them. Maybe you have the best intentions, but you walk away and you never even offer one prayer for what they just asked. Jesus says, don't do that. Don't do that. Just be honest in your speech. Randy, could you go and do this? Well, I'd like to go and do that for you, Scott, but you see, I've got to go over here and I've got to do this first, and let me get back to you. Well, sometimes it's good to think about things, but sometimes we're just stalling because we don't want to say no. And Jesus says, don't do that. I don't think God looked down and said, Moses, let's just make another commandment. Thou shalt not lie, because we really need to have 10. We need a decalogue. It just sounds better to have 10 than 9. So let's throw that one in there, as though God needed some more space to fill up on some stone. That's not why God said, do not lie, and he wasn't doing it to take away our fun. You know how I know that? Because I used to be a great liar. And you know what happens when, what you have to do to be a great liar? You have to have a great memory. Because once you tell one lie about something, then you've got to tell a whole network of lies to support that one. And my memory's not that good. Well, Randy, that's not what you said the last. Here's what I meant. And how many times have we done that? How many times have I done that? See, if you just let your yes be yes and your no be no, then it's not difficult to keep track. So they really ask you, can you do that? No, I really can't because I'm just overloaded. I'm trying to build margin and I don't have time. A month later, can you do that? No, I really can't. At least I did not contradict myself. I might be a rear end in your sight, but at least I didn't contradict myself. And that's what Jesus is saying. Don't add frou-frou, as we used to say in seminary. Don't add frou-frou to your speech to sound better than you are. Just say yes, just say no, otherwise you go wrong. Simplify the way you speak to other people. But listen, there's another way you need to simplify, guys. We need to simplify the way that we speak to God. Now listen very, very closely. This will help some of you. Simplify the way that you're speaking to God. You know why? Because God's not looking down from His throne in heaven and saying, let me see who I can find is the most eloquent prayer today. You've heard, sometimes, let's put it this way, sometimes people have difficulty being themselves when they pray to God. Now, when you and I talk to them, just like I'm talking to you right now, they talk in just regular, old American English. Now, depending on where you live, little Alabama drawl is okay, but we're just talking regular old English. And they'll talk like this, and they'll cut up with you, and they'll go to the ball game with you, and they'll go here with you, and they talk and have a good time. But the moment they pray, it's like they open up this bag and start dumping out the these and the thous and the wherefores. Now listen, there's nothing wrong with that unless you think that God doesn't hear you unless you speak King James. There's nothing wrong with speaking in that language. It's a beautiful form of the English language. But there are those who will talk and just be themselves and open up. And the moment they start praying, they start tying all these phrases together in the King James vernacular, and they tag it all, and they just string one after another. And next week they might flip this one in front of this one and add this one at the end. And then they think that this is what God considers authentic. Let me tell you what God considers authentic. God considers authentic when you talk to Him from your heart. That's what's authentic to God, not how many phrases and bits of language that we've picked up from our childhood together to make a right prayer. The right prayer comes from your heart. It's like the little boy who got up. I told you the story probably many times before. The little boy, I love the story though. He gets up and he's praying what he's only thing he's ever heard in his life. And he's praying this prayer and gets to this part and he says, "And Lord, thank you for letting us gather without fear of moles and stations." And what he was trying to say was, he'd heard his whole life, "Thank you for letting us gather without fear of molestation." But he thought it was moles and stations. Now, he didn't know what moles and stations were, but he was glad we weren't afraid of them. But see, that's how we tend to stick it all together. God is not looking for the right phrases. He's looking for us to be honest. Not the public stand up and give this eloquent, the James Earl Jones voice sounding prayer so that God can go, "Whoa, all right, Randy's praying. Now I got everybody else be quiet. Let me listen to this one." That's not the way God works. Listen to what Jesus says about public prayer or private prayer, either one. When you come before God, that is in prayer, don't turn that into a theatrical production either. All these people making a regular show out of their prayers, hoping for stardom. Do you think God sits in a box seat? Here's what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so that you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense His grace. The world is full of so-called prayer warriors who are prayer ignorant. They're full of formulas and programs and advice, peddling techniques for getting what you want from God. Don't fall for that nonsense. This is your Father you're dealing with, and He knows better than you what you need. Talk to God honestly, and talk to Him whether you talk out loud like I'm speaking now, or you speak to Him in the privacy of your own mind. Talk to God about how you're feeling. If you're angry, tell Him. If you're upset, if you're feeling hatred, tell Him. If you're excited, tell Him. If you're just thanking Him and praising Him for something in your life, tell Him repeatedly. You think He doesn't already know? Of course He already knows. He's looking to see if you trust Him enough to tell Him. That's what He wants. He wants honesty. He already knows what you're thinking. So here's a good rule of thumb when you pray. Be honest, be respectful, but most of all, be yourself. That's a good way to pray. Be honest, be respectful, and be yourself. simplify the way you speak to other people and simplify the way you speak to God. Guys, if we're going to have a simple life complexion, then we have to simplify the way we act. Simplify the way we act. And here's why. Because relationships can get complicated beyond belief without much help from us, as though you already needed to know that, as though you already didn't know that. For me, here's what, because I deal in so many relationships with so many people, here's what relationships are like to me. They're like one of those really fancy schmancy dinners that you go to. I don't know, I haven't been to a lot in my life, but I've been to a few. I'm talking about the kind where you dress to the nines and you sit down at you sit down at your plate and they've got more forks and knives and spoons in front of your plate than you've got in your whole drawer at home. You know what I'm talking about? And they bring out different, they bring out something and then they take that away, and then they bring out something and they take that away. And I've been, like I said, I hadn't been to many, but I've been to several. And Kelly gets so mad at me because I'm not comfortable in that setting. And so, to offset my uncomfortableness in that setting, I would deliberately act like a redneck or like some uncultured goof and make fun of how uppity we were all being, And I'll just confess, it was wrong to do that. It was wrong to do that. But you have to understand, from being from West Texas, they just better be glad I'm housebroken. And I'm sitting down at a plate that's got 4 forks on this side and some spoons and, a funny shaped spoon and a long skinny spoon. And I'm thinking, where do you even start? So I just have to watch other people. What are they going to do? And how do they eat? And leave a little portion left on your plate. I'm thinking, I'm not leaving any portion left on my plate. I'm hungry. I'm going to eat all of it. What's this all about? And I asked this person, I remember one time we were sitting and there was these different spoons. And so I started to pick up a spoon to stir some sugar or something in my tea. She said, no, you don't use that spoon. That's the sorbet spoon. And I said, oh, okay. And I was thinking, what the world is sorbet? So later on, they bring out sorbet. I think that's ice cream. Just call it ice cream. That's what it is. See, relationships can be like that sometimes. They are like these fancy schmancy dinners that have all the stuff, and if you get it out of whack, then things get messed up. Listen, that's the way people are. And I know that there are some people in your sphere of relationships, they just need to be petted all the time. They just need to be stroked a little bit and built up, and so I do it. And you probably do it too. And then there are other folks who just need some extra attention, and so I do my best to give them the attention that they need. And then there are people who are so insecure about themselves and unsure that they need some confidence builders. And I can tell you from experience that when I was a college minister and Kelly and I would counsel just young lady after young lady, 18 to 23 years old, who had no self-esteem, no self-confidence. They'd been beaten down, and they were using their bodies and anything else they could to try to find affection from guys. Listen, we did our best to say, you know what, you're a beautiful person just the way you are. God made you the way you are. You're beautiful on the inside first, and then let that blossom. Guys, it gets complicated. And you know why? I give those who need to be petted a little extra petting, and those who need a little extra attention, more attention, and those who need a little confidence boost, a confidence boost. You know why I do that? Not because it's fun, because it doesn't always work, and it can be a heartbreaking experience, but because that's the way I want to be treated. Jesus says it this way: don't pick on people, jump on their faults. Jump on their failures, rather, criticize their faults, unless, of course, you want that same treatment. That critical spirit has a way of boomeranging. So here's a simple rule of thumb guide for behavior. Ask yourself what you want people to do for you, then grab the initiative and do it for them. Anybody know what that passage is typically referred to as? The golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Guess what, guys? That's working from the inside out. Changing the way we speak starts from the inside and goes out. Changing the way we act starts from the inside and goes out. Now listen, I'll be the first to admit, this is not the natural way to respond, and I'm not going to stand up here and pretend like that the people who need that extra attention, all that stuff I just said, that I always provide that. Sometimes I just grit my teeth and close the door. I'm just being honest. Because it's not easy. And I'm going to tell you what else, it's not natural. It's not the natural way to respond, because the world has its own standards, the world has its own way of doing things. And the number one The number one world rule in the way of behavior is this: not do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It is do unto others as they have done unto you. That is the number one rule in the world, and that's what we call the law of reciprocity. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. You slap my face, I slap yours. You hi-hat me, I hi-hat you right back. Be friendly, I'll be friendly right back. Ignore me, I'll ignore you right back. It's just like the little boy I told you about in Kelly's PE class. He's always getting in a scruff, and Kelly pulled him aside and said, you know, don't fight at school. Don't do that. Just walk away. My daddy told me if somebody hauls off and hits me, I'm supposed to haul off and hit them right back. That's the law of reciprocity. And guess what, guys? Nobody wins in the law of reciprocity. It goes back and forth and back and forth. And another thing about the law of reciprocity is we tend to keep score. Well, I don't know that I can just be friends with them anymore. I've done 3 acts of kindness to them. They've only done 1 back to me. Keeping score. Something somewhere, seems like some great writer put down one time, love keeps no record and doesn't keep score. I don't know, maybe I just made that up. Seems like it ought to be written down somewhere if it's not. There's another rule that the world lives by, not just the rule of reciprocity, but what I call the rule of misery, the misery rule. And that is, you got dealt misery at home, so now you deal it. You got dealt misery by your parents, so now you're going to deal it to your kids. You get dealt misery at work, boy, you're going to come home and deal it to wife and kids. Your life is full of misery, buddy, you're going to share it with everybody you can. That's the misery rule. Guess what? Deal in the misery rule and you will be miserable. I know, I can name 5 people right now that are 60 years of age or older. And every time you see them, no matter where they are, what they're doing, they're never happy. I'm talking about raised on vinegar and weaned on a sour pickle look all the time. Just always angry, always mad. Somebody's cut them down and cut them off, and they got ripped off of this and their whole life. Guess what? They're dealing in the misery rule. They think they've been dealt a bad hand, so they're going to turn around and deal it back to everybody else. Here's the problem. If you live like that, you will be unhappy. But the other side of that coin is if you live by the golden rule, count on it, write it down, you will get hurt. If you live by, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, you will get hurt. Because not everybody's going to live by the golden rule. Most people, in fact, don't live by the golden rule. So you say, so why should I do it? Why should I let folks treat me that way? Why should I just let folks just walk all over me? Trample me down. Listen to what Jesus says later on in the book of Matthew. Do you want to stand out? Then step down. Be a servant. If you puff yourself up, you'll get the wind knocked out of you. But if you're content to simply be yourself. Now listen to this last phrase. Your life will count for plenty. You know what, guys? There's one scorekeeper, and his name is God. And he's looking down, and you live by the golden rule, your life will count for plenty. No matter if you get trampled on, walked on, cheated, in God's eyes, your life counts for plenty. And you will get your just reward one day. Life gets much less complicated when we simplify the way we act. So let's live by the golden rule. And last of all, you want to simplify your life complexion. If you want to simplify your perspective of life, then simplify the way that you believe. And you think, whoa, this is getting a little dangerous here. Hear me out. There is so much in my heritage, my church heritage, for which I'm thankful. So much. I'm thankful for a mother and a grandmother like Timothy in the Bible had, a mother and a grandmother who raised him, went to church, learned a love for the Scriptures, learned a love for fellowship with other Christians. I learned many, many good things that I still implement today, and I'm so grateful for all of those things. There are some things, though, for which I'm not so thankful because it has taken me 15 or more years to relearn some things, and I'm still relearning them. Some of what I was brought up with was so complicated and so convoluted that it messed up my way of thinking. It was not a simple way of believing. It was a totally complicated way of believing. I had this whole system of syllogisms and arguments and proof text with one goal, not to take somebody who was not a Christian and help them see the light and follow Jesus, but rather to argue with them, out-argue them, debate them, and win and put them in their place. That's what my system of belief was all about. And I had this whole repertoire of arguments, and I was like this lawyer. And you say, well, tell me about faith. Faith! And boy, I could just boom, 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 give you the passages all the way down. Well, what about baptism? And I do the same thing. And this is why this guy in this church is wrong, and this guy needs to alter this, otherwise he's okay. And I had this whole complicated, convoluted way of thinking. And yet that's, I don't think that's what God ever wanted at all. My system of belief centered on pointing out the mistakes of others. Not only is that an unhealthy way to live and believe, it's a sick way to believe. Because that's not what it's about. The Jews in Jesus' day had the same problem. They had this huge, complicated hierarchy belief system, and so they came to him one day and they said, Jesus, who gets the highest rank in the kingdom? Now, why would they ask a question like that? Because of their belief system, how structured it was, and it was the food chain idea. The top of the food chain is the top, and whoever's right under that, and then, it's this pyramid thing. And so they were asking, who gets the highest rank? You want to know why? Because they want to know who was going to be second and third and fourth. And if you don't believe that, just keep reading. James and John ask, Lord, we know that when you show up in your glory, would it be okay if one of us sit on your right and one on your left? Can we be 2 and 3? They wanted to know the hierarchy so they know where they were in this spiritual food chain. And so Jesus, for an answer, says, he calls over a little child whom he had stand in the middle of the room and said, I'm telling you once and for all that unless you return to square one and start over like children, you're not even going to look at the kingdom, get a look at the kingdom, let alone get in. Whoever becomes simple and elemental again, like this child, will rank in God's kingdom. What's more, when you receive the childlike on my account, it's the same as receiving me. But if you give them a hard time, bullying or taking advantage of their simple trust, you'll soon wish you hadn't. You'd be better off dropped in the middle of a lake with a millstone around your neck. Why is it, do you suppose, that Jesus likens kingdom living, simple faith, to children? I'll tell you. Because children know that they're not the greatest. You don't have to tell them. They know. Children know they're not the greatest, and so they act like it. Children don't go with you to the restaurant and go, oh, Dad, let me pick up the check. It's on me tonight. They don't do that. They know someone's going to pick up the check. That's why kids can get in the back of the car on a 12-hour drive and be asleep an hour into it and sleep the whole way there while you're just fighting. How can they do that instead of going, I wonder if Dad's going to be okay. I wonder if, do we need to pull over and let me drive? I know I'm only 8, but maybe I could reach the pedal if you... They don't do that. They simply trust in their parents that they will be taken care of. That's what Jesus says. If you want to simplify your life, get back to the basics, you become like a child, because children have to have someone to depend upon. They have to. Children who don't have anyone to depend upon die. Or they become so emotionally unstable and mentally handicapped that they can't function. Children understand what it means to have simple trust. What do you think, guys? What do you think makes you right in God's sight? What do you think it takes for God to look down and say, I'm pleased with Randy? That's a good thing. What do you think it takes? Well, here's what the text says. God makes people right with himself through their faith in Jesus Christ. This is true for all who believe in Christ, because all people are the same. All people are the same. Jesus Christ and him crucified. Is that simple enough? Yeah. For God so loved the world. Is that simple enough? Simplify the way you talk. Simplify the way you act. Simplify the way you believe. Before you know it, life will be the best it can be.